This presentation will briefly introduce you to the United Nations Decade of Education for Sustainable Development and the series of UN Earth Summits since 1992 that have contributed to the view that education has a key role in securing more sustainable futures for young people in the world today. Whilst more recent work in the field of ESD has highlighted the importance of positive and hopeful starting points, it is without doubt that much of the rationale for ESD becoming a prominent international agenda was originally based upon increasing concern over the state of the world and the patterns of human development that this implicates. Philip Martin refers to this modern-day phenomenon of multiple points of crisis in his book The Meaning of the 21st Century as mega problems. He presents a provocative perspective on the need for a radical change in how we live and to gain a deeper appreciation of the complexity of our modern lives. He does this by identifying a range of mega problems which he describes as points of crisis that cross international boundaries, disciplinary knowledge and human and ecological spheres. It is these mega problems that sustainable development very much seeks to address. But what is sustainable development exactly? The term sustainable development is a contested and complex concept in itself. The scholar David Selby recently claimed that well over 300 definitions of sustainable development currently exist. This includes, of course, the landmark Brundtland definition, which first appeared in 1987 and that stated, "The goal of sustainable development is in essence to enable all people throughout the world to satisfy their basic needs and enjoy a better quality of life without compromising the quality of life of future generations." A more recent definition of sustainable development aimed at young people framed it as being an active concern for well-being across three interconnected dimensions: care for oneself, care for each other across cultures, distances and generations, and care for the environment, both near and far. However worded, some agreement exists around sustainable development being concerned with the pressing challenge of how do we get from where we are now to a more sustainable society? How do we remove the structural impediments to more humane patterns of development? And how do we mobilise and inspire people today towards activities that make a positive contribution to the well-being of both people and planet? Despite its contested nature, sustainable development is increasingly being recognised as a vital agenda across the world. This is represented by the fact that the United Nations launched its Decade for Sustainable Development in 2005. The UN describes the overall goal of the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development, DESD, as being to integrate the principles, values and practices of sustainable development into all aspects of education and learning. This educational effort seeks to encourage changes in behaviour that will create a more sustainable future in terms of environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society for present and future generations. The DESD seeks to secure for all learning opportunities that are centred around exploring the values, behaviour and lifestyles required for a sustainable future and for positive societal transformation. Their vision also includes educational opportunities concerned with notions of adaptability and resilience in order to prepare a transition generation of people who are able to find solutions for the mega problems previously mentioned. The Decade of ESD has deliberately been conceived of as being a broad endeavour that calls on individuals and stakeholders at all levels, local to international, to be involved. Governments, civil society, NGOs and business and industry are all seen to have a vital role to play alongside education. The UN identifies 7 specific strategies within the Decade of ESD that can be applied by stakeholders both in their own institutional frameworks and in the networks and alliances in which they function. And these are vision building and advocacy, consultation and ownership, partnership and networks, capacity building and training, research and innovation, use of information and communication technologies, and monitoring and evaluation. Much work has been advanced in the area of ESD through the United Nations. Formed in the aftermath of World War II, It is encouraging all its 192 member states to engage in the problem of securing a more sustainable future through a variety of educational initiatives within schools, colleges and universities, and also within the informal sector that first all came to prominence at the Earth Summit in 1992. The United Nations first gave comprehensive attention to education for sustainable development in its Conference on Environment and Development held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992. Commonly referred to as the first Earth Summit, this event was attended by over 170 governments, but crucially also involved more than 2,000 representatives from a wide variety of non-governmental organisations and charities. The summit even involves Seven Suzuki, a 12-year-old from Vancouver, representing to political leaders a young person's perspective on the need for change, her speech still proving to be extremely popular on YouTube. A variety of groundbreaking policy initiatives were instigated at this summit, including the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, with the Kyoto Protocol, the global agreement to cut greenhouse gas emissions, being developed as part of this convention. Another crucial outcome from the summit was the Agenda 21 agreement. Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally and locally by organisations of the United Nations system in every area in which humans impact on the environment. Agenda 21 included a whole section on reorientating education towards sustainable development. It stated that education, including formal education, public awareness and training, should be recognised as a process by which human beings and societies can reach their fullest potential. Education was viewed as being critical for promoting sustainable development and improving the capacity of people to address environmental and development issues. Agenda 21 also stated that both formal and non-formal education are indispensable to challenging people's attitudes so that they have the capacity to assess and address sustainable development concerns. A decade on from Rio, in 2002, a second Earth Summit was held, this time in Johannesburg in South Africa. Once again, government representatives and NGOs met at this World Summit on Sustainable Development in order to try and politically address multiple points of crisis with regard to both development and the environment. The full implementation of Agenda 21 and the commitments to the Rio principles were strongly reaffirmed in Johannesburg. A key outcome from this second summit was the announcement of the UN Decade for ESD, commencing in 2005. In June 2012, the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development returned to Brazil. 20 years on, many NGOs, environmental and human rights campaigners complained at the lack of progress world leaders had made and felt that much of the conference was derailed by a lack of political will by many of the most wealthy countries to advance key sustainability agendas. All three Earth Summits have highlighted some of the complexities involved in the attempt to reach international agreements on sustainability issues, such as climate change, and the transformative approaches to education that this agenda ultimately requires. Many commentators have reached the conclusion from this summit that this failure of world leaders placed an even more vital role on civil society to lead sustainability from the bottom up. The key role of educational institutions in supporting civil society with this mandate was once again recognised in Brazil. During a Rio+20 side event, leaders of the international academic community announced a new higher education initiative for sustainable development. The initiative will be facilitated by an umbrella of the United Nations partner organisations, recognising the importance to sustainable education for future decision makers and future. Despite this unprecedented political agreement on seeking to aid the progress of sustainable development worldwide, progress has been slow. Vast problems with regard to poverty, inequality and environmental degradation remain and in some cases have intensified, much to the dismay of many non-governmental organisations such as Friends of the Earth, Oxfam and WWF. This has led to many involved in advancing the decade of ESD, such as Professor Charles Hopkins at York University in Canada, to claim that the educational imperative remains today as much as it did when the idea for the decade was first conceived.